and then there's about a 30-second delay. Hello, everyone. And Oscar, please start when you're ready.
Cool. Thank you so much for this. I'm assuming we're live now.
Yes, sir.
Today, just planning on starting out with giving some updates on the community. Thank you so much to Dr. Sanchez for giving the time to give these updates. Just want to get you guys informed as to what's going on and a little bit of a vision for the future going forward. So continuing on, as earlier stated, we were planning on having the Zoom on the GenAI Global LinkedIn page. Due to some technical difficulties, we weren't able to have it this week on there. But on a silver lining note, not next week, but the week after, we're going to be hosting it on our LinkedIn page to continue signal boosting GenAI Global as a community and making sure that you guys are deriving the most value you can from the community. In terms of updates concerning admissions, because there's been a lot of questions.
I think there's an issue. Sorry, I think there's an issue with the audio. John, are you hearing okay from your side?
Yeah, I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Testing 1 2, testing 1 2. You guys can hear me as well? Cool. Okay, so I'll continue on. Just as I was stating, there's been a lot of questions about how to gain entrance into this community. As of now, we're holding off admissions until May 26th due to the volume that is coming our way. To facilitate that, we've been building up a volunteer team that is very, very comprehensive across multiple departments. So for anyone who wants to join now, we're only onboarding volunteers at this point, but feel free to DM our GenAI Global LinkedIn page. And just want to state as well, since there's been some questions on the WhatsApp side about the makeup of this community. So this is not run directly by MIT PE. It's a community from the course, but it is in affiliation with them. Continuing on, just want to announce that we are also going to be having live expert sessions on our GenAI Global LinkedIn page. Our content creation team is going to be curating really strong thought leaders in the AI space to come and have talks and Q&As as well to continue expanding this community and its reach. So just want to give you guys an update on that in terms of we're going to be providing more value on that end as well. And since next week, Dr. Sanchez will be traveling, and there's been a lot of questions concerning the community and the future of this community on both WhatsApp and on Discord. The goal was next week to have you guys collect your top 6 questions across both platforms, and I would answer in a live session, which will be hosted on GenAI Global. And that's it for updates on my end, and feel free to take it away. Just one last point that I quickly forgot to mention was just want to announce Rodrigo Reyes as Member of the Week. Completely deserved, has been working countless hours for this community, and everyone congratulate him. He truly deserves it. And that's it on my end. I'll stop sharing.
So thank you, Oscar. I'm going to go ahead and remove it to John and myself. It's truly amazing what the community has built. GenAI Global has momentum unlike anything I've seen ever at MIT. And now that I see it up close, I know why. Because it's like building a company. You know, there's already a CISO in place, and there's many other components that you would think, oh, this is just community. No, it's big, big, big. So anyway, I wanted to jump in today to today's topic and start going through the questions. There's some great questions on the sheet, and in fact, I think the first one is one that we've talked about a lot, and so I'm going to go ahead and skip it, although it's number one. I'll come back to it just because John and I think, are tired of answering this question, but I'll come back to it. Let me deal with the first three here, which I think are a little bit different.
Actually, Abel, on the CISO, did you see that Coinbase got
Yeah.
hacked? 20 million,
Yes.
and they're not paying.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I had a text from Coinbase saying,
Yeah.
"Did you do this?" And it's like, I'm not doing anything there.
Yeah. Right. So I'm gonna go ahead here and and let me go ahead and bring in my and set the stage here to try to give ourselves some structure. And so I'm going to go ahead and start here with the second question, and it says, in large organizations, and this, by the way, this is a question that we hear a lot, and this is why I wanted to start with it. Legacy often slows down AI adoption, both in terms of IT infrastructure and organizational mindset. I've experienced major blockers such as tightly integrated ERP and CRM systems, highly risk-adverse security and compliance functions, and limited change willingness in middle management. Beyond the obvious hygiene factors like stakeholders buy-in and staff communication, what do you see as the key levers to truly unlock AI now and going forward? So this is the real, to me, the real problem, John.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it at our level in MIT. I mean, basically, both Abel and I are buying, these accounts that we have on our own dollar.
Yeah.
Because if we try to go through MIT, we're gonna have to justify things, and we just won't be able to keep up. But I do think, I wanted to automate my email, and there's somebody at MIT that controls that, and I haven't got the time to find out who it is, and there's no mechanism to do that. That our information systems people, they've got a helpline, but my chances of being able to get programmatic access to Outlook are pretty minimal. And so I think you're absolutely right about it's not clear that your IT people will be on your side. They're there for stability. They have to keep the lights on. They have to keep the email service going, etc. So I have some sympathy for that. But you're absolutely right that it just adds so much friction. You won't be able to experiment with your internal corporate systems. Abel, what's your sense on that?
So, I mean, just reset it there. No, I think you hit it right on the head. I was listening to the CTO of the Army speaking with the CTO of the Navy, and I'll post it into actually, given the volume and activity, I know I won't get to it, but it's a podcast from A16Z, Anderson Horowitz, and it's a conversation with both the CTO of the Navy, as I mentioned, and the CTO of the Army. And he was saying that 20 years ago, they instituted programs that required 16 systems that each of them created their own maps. And then 10 years into this, so this was 2005, 2015, they came to the realization, hey, this Google Maps thing can do the same thing as these 16 systems of record. Why don't we use that? And he was saying, there's all these excuses about security and blessing of the data and all of these departments that own it. And it took them another 5 years, from that realization to start working with KMLs and some of the standards that are open, and another 5 years to try to get to the point where they can start to replace these systems. And oddly enough, they still haven't managed. And so this is a 20-year journey of trying to replace mapping systems with something that essentially can do the same thing, right? And it's just open and flexible and easy to use, and it's modern and everything else that we're talking about. And so this is a big bear, and I think it is. I don't know about you, John, but I think it's worth having us another round at it because I have a lot more to say, and I'm running out of time here. So let me give you a shot here, John. Again.
Well, no, I'd just like to continue down the same path. I've been thinking seriously about, why are the old methods breaking? Well, one is the clock tick has got a lot faster. It's pretty clear that now you have to make decisions much faster if you want to keep up with the technology. And it's pretty clear something like generative AI is going to make huge changes to industry. And it's unclear exactly what they're going to be, but you have to be flexible. And that flexibility is tough to build into large companies. So I'm beginning to think that I can see that the major tech companies, the $1 trillion companies, okay, you're not gonna split them up, but I think size is, not on your side anymore. I mean, it used to give stability in terms of finance that, when you're a startup, you really don't have money. Cash is king, that you have to get the receipts in, you have to try and get people to pay you. Even if you've got startup money, somebody's putting a gun to your head that you've got deadlines that you have to meet. So my sense is that I'm wondering if there's a different structure to companies, that the hierarchical top-down control. I think hierarchy is built into most human and animal systems, that it's a basic thing, that, and probably as humans we sometimes like to follow people, that we like to have a leader, that maybe we're lazy, but it does seem to me that the top level people now probably don't have the information to make a lot of decisions that they're gonna have to make. Abel, I see my time's up.
Yeah. So let me take my second stab at it. I've thought about this quite a bit, and one of the things that I like to pay attention to is change. And if you've heard me before, I referenced the book. Um, it's by Heath, and it's called Switch, and it's about how to change when change is hard. But if you look at technology specifically, we've been through this one with cloud, and what I mean by that is that Microsoft, if you're old enough, if you have gray hair, you'll remember that Microsoft introduced Hailstorm, sort of a precursor to the cloud idea back in 2020. Sorry, 2000. This is 25 years ago, right? And industry said, no, no way. We're not getting locked into all this stuff that you're trying to sell us. I don't care if it's in the cloud. I don't care if it's flexible. No, there's no way. I'm not buying it. Now, Amazon, Google, and many others started to build their own systems internally, and they realized how much effort it took. And so they thought pretty soon people would want the same. And so they started to build cloud systems that they thought industry might want to buy. And it took a good 10 years. It wasn't, they were doing this back in 2001. In about 2009, 2010, that's when Netflix famously made the decision. And at 2010, most companies wouldn't go there. There's a long list that I could go through of why companies didn't want to go there. But if you look at that today, cloud is the number one spend. So studying up what has worked in the transformation to cloud, in the path to cloud, and there's a number of books, that I'll list some of my recommendations in a minute, or when John speaks, I will. And so I think this gives us hope, and it also shows us a model that we can follow, because this idea of somebody else is going to run your stuff is pretty threatening, and somebody else is going to hold your data, and some companies still won't do it today. So now I'm up. So let me go ahead and and read. Timers are good. Let me go ahead and read the next question. It says, in large scale organizations, legacy often slows down AI adoption. Oh, I think I'm rereading the first one. So
Yeah, I think
let
it
me go
sounds
ahead.
like the first one.
Yeah. So the next question is, how can companies effectively integrate AI in key areas and manage organizational change along the way? So avoiding the culture is eating strategy, and taking into consideration that a vast majority of enterprises are still coping with other stages of digital transformation rather than AI. And this is the reality. So I think it's more of the same. Go ahead, John.
No, I mean, obviously, what we're doing is we're trying to get up to speed and see how this technology works. And at the same time as we're, building our agents on top of libraries, those libraries are changing. So it's tough at the moment. And what you're seeing to some extent is, you had Pinecone that came up with vector databases. They solved, a part of the problem, but then along come OpenAI and say, no, we'll do that for you. We'll do it behind the scenes. And so it does seem to me that we haven't got stable platforms. Sorry, we've got quite large platforms. Microsoft has their platform. AutoGen is out there, but they've got their own politics going on. This was a couple of people that spun out of Microsoft, and they forked the repo, and basically now there's two AutoGens out there, one backed by Microsoft, which I think is now called Python AutoGen, and AutoGen that you'll find if you just type in AutoGen to GitHub. So, we've got LangChain and we've got Crew AI and a few others, but it does seem to me that they're still pretty fluid, that they're changing the way that they're, looking at agents, for example. We've seen this new MCP come along, model context protocol for clumping together tools. So you're going to give your agent tools, and these servers are going to allow you to give your agent, 70 tools to basically handle GitHub, or 20 tools to handle your email. So the area is moving quite fast, but there's no all-time winners coming out at the moment. What's your sense, Abel?
Yeah, so sorry, I was trying to juggle. I think in many ways, let me go ahead and set my timer here. I need to go back to that one. The challenge is establish practice, right? Companies were not made to transform, right? They were made to deliver on a product and a vision. And if you're successful, you have achieved that, and it's comfortable, right? My wife and I were talking about this last night, that why do we like some of the vintage things? And we're saying, oh, it's because we remember them, we know the feel. It's just easy, as opposed to trying to, for example, we have a toaster that we continue to be surprised by it. We used to forcibly eject the bread, when anyway, it's this really great toaster, right? But it's complicated to operate. And so we're set in our ways, and we have achieved success in delivering something a certain way. And so it's pretty tough to ask us to go do something else. But one of the things that I think is worth noting here is that one was the cloud model that I talked about before, and there's several books there. The other is the levers to promote organizational change. And within my recommendations there, you'll see Mark Schwartz, and he talks about bureaucracy in the organization. He worked within government, and he's got amazing stories that will dwarf any type of challenges you have. And so that's a great recommendation as well. And the third one that I would make is the bottom-up approach. I've seen companies, and we've worked, both of us, with companies in Latin America primarily, where you have really strong hierarchies, start to do the cloud transformation by selecting a different group, having a success, and from there, that facilitates change. Now, it's easy to say, right? Much harder to do, but there's a good amount of literature and use cases to take a look at. So let me go ahead and move on here to the next one. So third question is, as agentic AI, sorry, font is very small, I can't see it. As agentic AI becomes capable of autonomously performing multi-step tasks across distributed systems and platforms, how can we establish trust in the authenticity and intent behind each request it initiates? So they're full of all the tough questions today, John. Go ahead.
You can go first next time then.
Yeah.
No, I
I'm
was
happy to
reading
go.
I was reading a paper, and in this paper they tested out, I think about 5 or 6 of the top LLMs, and so Gemini, Llama, etc. And they were surprised that they put the same prompt in, and each model gave something different. And they're saying, "Oh, this is everything is unstable," but I'm not sure they realized that the company that owns, OpenAI with GPT is going to put in a super prompt before your prompt ever hits the LLM. The LLM is being prompted by that company, and it sits in front of your prompt. So, and typically, if you look at these prompts that they're putting in, and you can look at the OpenAI one, when you first go to ChatGPT, say, put into a block whatever you had message you had before, and it'll type out this super prompt. And you'll see that these super prompts are all different. Each company has a very different prompt. And so the answer that's going to come out, you're putting in essentially a different prompt to each system. And it's no wonder that the answers are not consistent, that they're going to come out quite different. So my sense is that it's like interviewing, 3 people and asking them their opinion on, is the market great, or what's the state of the market? You're going to get very different opinions. And my sense is, we're trying to lay on top of language models the rules that we apply to computing. When we were developing libraries, that we wanted them tested, we wanted to know exactly how they would come out. If we put the same thing in, the answer should be the same. But I'm not sure that applies to this. I think this is a new kind of technology. Abel.
So I think, we often look for parallels, right? I talked about before about the cloud and how does that help us think about the current time. And one of the things that I was thinking about as John was speaking was Waze. Waze was based on data, and it was making decisions as to which way you should go. And in fact, there's stories by their engineers of how LA was basically brought down when Waze was misbehaving because everybody was following it, right? And they had a problem, internal problem with configurations. But this is a pretty good example, I think, that we know it can make a mistake, and it's up to us whether we listen to it or not. And people have complained about the navigation systems that take them into the ocean and the weird things, but in general, it's pretty helpful. And so as I think about this, and I think about the software we've tested before, software has misbehaved. CrowdStrike brought down, the world in their last problem. And if we go back, in cybersecurity, certainly, we have WannaCry, and we have a number of problems that we've navigated through before. So it's not like this is without precedent. And so what I would think is, think about traditional code workflow and think about your decision in and out of every decision point. Traditionally, this has been, as John mentioned, very tight and much more deterministic. But now, for example, if you're going to go out and get the weather, you don't know what the weather is going to be, but you need to be able to code around that, right? Meaning, what's going to come out? What decisions am I going to make? If I don't understand it, I need to drop it on the floor or stop, right? And so and of course, this doesn't apply to weather simulation or things that are too exotic, but for your traditional business workflows, I think this is a pretty good recipe. And I'm going to be out of time, so I'll stop there. Do you want to do another round, John, or or go on to the next one?
Well, no, I mean, I would just like to comment that I think, there needs to be a stopping condition, right? When has the agent succeeded in doing what they're supposed to do? Now, suppose you're doing a web search, that the agent's going to go out, and depending on whether it's going to use Brave browser or Google or Bing, it's going to get different answers. And so the question is, when is it done? And traditional computing, that's one of the first things we know how to do is, we're going to stop it. And at the moment, with the LLMs, a lot of the time it's not clear that it knows when it's finished. And it's going to write a deep search report, for example. It's going to do a pretty good job, but is it missing something? Probably. However, if you asked a human to do that report, they'd probably take 3 days and not have as good a product. So my sense is here, I think it's more what's good enough. That as long as it's not causing people to die, I think we need to treat it more like a human. That we got to cut it some slack, and it's not as if we have a means of knowing the right answer in a lot of these cases. And so how does the machine know when it's got the right answer? Abel.
So let me go ahead and restart my timer here. So John brings up a good point. I think there's scenarios in where we don't know the right answer, and I'll give you a specific example. I was trying to do some intelligence on a conference, and I wanted to know more about the speakers, which meant country of origin, places where they work, sort of their bios, but really dig in and get a real profile, much more enhanced than what it was at the conference. Now, how do I know if that's right, as John mentioned? People lie all the time about what they have accomplished, right? And so they could be lying themselves. Now, that's a scenario that AI or no AI, you're not going to have certainty, right? But there's many things, such as, for example, the scenario that John was giving. You're trying to get a price on a page, right? These applications have been written before AI, and people have painfully dug through all the cruft that comes back and have extracted this to take positions or buy products right on Amazon. I have a a former student that he used to make money like this because sneakers are a big
Yeah.
thing in the US and people buy them, and so he would build bots that would go out and buy these sneakers when they were available, and he would get on the output of the systems, please contact us, we're trying to hire people like you. But meaning this was being done. Now you can do the exact same thing without us being as talented as the student I'm referring to, and this is going to be deterministic. It's going to come back yes or no, and you can determine the validity of this over some testing period. But in the scenarios where John is mentioning, where we can't tell as humans, that's a different case. But there's a lot of business cases in enterprise computing where we're dealing with very straightforward business workflows, right? These are the applications that have been written for generations. And then I think for those, automation is within reach. And so you can probably tell that we're not fully in agreement there, but I think that's a good thing. So let me go ahead on to the next question. Um, the next question, and this one looks easy. Those have been tough, good questions. This one says, what is the best generative AI available today? We have ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, DeepSeek. What are the differences between each of the listed above? And are there any use cases where one LLM is better than another? So I lied. It's not a simple one. And I'll go first this time to be fair.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So so when it comes to these, it's not necessarily that one's better than another. It's that one might do better at certain types of problems than another. And there are about, if you navigate in whoever asked the question, just get on Google and type AI model types for OpenAI, and they have a screen with about 20 different kinds. And they have reasoning models, they have text to speech, they have speech to text, they have near real-time models, they have models that are created for cost. They have, a great variety of what these are. And I think as time goes by, we'll see this even more because and I forgot, did I start my timer? Yeah, I did. Good. And so these models are the hardest thing you can do with AI. They're basically asking these things to say, it doesn't matter what the person's problem is, solve it. And this is insane, right? Because basically it could be anything you can imagine, right? Now, as you constrain these, these will be much more capable because they will know a lot more about that domain, and they will be better prepared to help you, right? And so I think as we go forward, we'll see that a lot more specialized models, right? And these broader ones that try to do everything imaginable will continue to be good, but they won't be as good as the focused ones. And when it comes to these capabilities, think about that variation that I mentioned, reasoning models, models constructed for speed that can do pretty well on many things, but they're actually much faster and much cheaper. And are you working with voice or are you working with video? These are different concerns. John?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Abel. I think it depends on what you're trying to do. I wouldn't neglect all the machine learning models that came before generative AI. It turns out that these deep neural nets are basically, they can model any data. They'll find patterns in any kind of data. So they're powerful. If you have data, we've seen it now with some of the voice generators. They're getting so good now that I doubt if you could tell which is a human and which is artificial voice that they're creating from someone that's never existed. And you can tweak the voices now that to make them more energetic or enthusiastic, or they can be slower at explaining things. So my sense is that we've got to figure out where to use these LLMs. They're great at unstructured data. They're not good at voluminous data. That you can't throw, a terabyte of data at an LLM and say, okay, condense this down for me. So the main limitation is the size of this context window. Now, the latest models, OpenAI is up to 1 million tokens. Gemini is up to 2 million, or they're even talking about 10 million tokens. So you can put an awful lot. That's, I think of a token as roughly a word. It's a bit less than a word, actually, but I would say that's where, if you're programming these things, you're putting a lot of effort into managing this context window. What are you giving to the LLM? If I've got an agent that does a translation into Spanish, maybe I just want to give it the sentence that to be translated rather than the whole of what's gone before. So as you're going through, these agents don't have infinite bandwidth to memorize things. You're going to have to decide, okay, at some stage you may need to consolidate the previous conversation. So I'm just kind of waving here some of the issues that, these things are amazing, but they have limitations, and you're going to have to work with those. Abel?
So let me move on to the next question here. And the next question, I think this one is a simple one. How complex is it to integrate LLM models with existing enterprise systems such as CRMs, ERPs, or automation platforms? What tools are available to ensure traceability, explainability, and auditability? I can go
Yeah,
first here
take it.
again.
That's a difficult one.
So yeah, there's no easy question. So whoever selected the questions and voted for them, great job.
Yeah.
So this is a common complaint. I see all these opportunities and I have these rigid systems that if you listen to their leadership say, yes, we also have all this great AI. And before that, they said we have all this cloud integration and all this flexibility for data. And the reality is they don't. And so what do? Right? And we've seen a number of companies that take approaches such as let's integrate onto these legacy systems a cloud database. And many of them use things such as BigQuery, and they just dump all the data out. And by the way, the creators of these platforms have gotten wise. They now charge you for that output pipe. That's part of the license. And if essentially you're just piping everything out, you're going to get a big bill, right? But once you are in that environment, for example, in Google's BigQuery, then you are on a modern environment. and where you can start to build and integrate and extend and experiment. And so that's a great approach that, or not necessarily a great approach, but that's an approach that's been successful and I see many people using. Now, when it comes to traceability, explainability, this is evolving. And what I mean by that is that these are new stacks. And so the ability for you to, say, do time traveling, which people speak of, where you can replay the entire transaction and see the shortcomings, it's still coming along. OpenAI has some, LangChain has some, but it's still not a full picture and certainly not standardized. And so that's coming along. And let me go ahead and stop it there and pass it over to you, John. John?
Yeah, my sense is that, if you take a company like Netflix, they adapted to the new tooling really well. They adopted cloud. They didn't try to build their own cloud. Netflix went with AWS, even though AWS were running Prime, a competitor. They went with them and they said, we think our people can use the AWS cloud better than Prime people can use AWS cloud. I'll post a book because Patty McCord does a great job in a book called Powerful of talking about how to create, a different culture. So in Netflix, you can take as much time off as you want. There's no such things as, you have 2 weeks holiday here and another 2 weeks there. So they put they're pushing responsibility down onto the individual. Basically, you need to perform. And my sense now is that a lot of the things we do where we need this traceability, I'm coming back, you can see where I'm going, I think, Abel, to expenses. Why are we spending hours of our time filling in expenses? And it's often we're talking about minimum amounts. It's just not worth the time. And I remember when I first went to MIT, you had to record all your phone calls and add up every phone call. I mean, it's just a different world, I think. And I think that's part of the problem. We've got these legacy systems that were built, 20, 30 years ago when companies were different. And now it's not so easy to rip out a legacy system, that's for sure. But I think we do need to recognize that there's a whole lot of new tooling. People's time is precious, that we need to give them the tools that they need to do the job and actually trust them to do it. Abel.
So somebody said they're missing the music. Yeah, the music is great.
Yes, right.
That play.
Cut you down, right?
So,
have to stop.
So I'm trying to choose here questions that are so here's one, right? So ones that are a little bit different because some of them have a common theme. So this one says, how can companies adopt generative AI to enhance employee productivity and engagement without creating fear of job displacement? And I think this is one that, and I'll go ahead and answer that one first. I think this is one that is tough because in some ways you're fighting the media, right? There's a number of publications that are what I call often doomers, right? They say that's it, society is going to end, nothing else will work, and everybody will be, at home, bored, and have no purpose in life, and so on. And of course I'm exaggerating, but I tend to cite a lot of books, right? But one of the ones that goes through the scenario is Super Agency. It's a book by Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, that we're using right now. And he details previous times in history, going back to the 60s and 70s and so on, when there have been similar fears, right? And so I think some of it is telling people some of that history, and others is highlighting the opportunities that have come. So there's a number of jobs that, for example, prompt engineering, right, that didn't used to exist, and there's a number of other opportunities that are coming up, like like last night I was trying a new video generation movie. Amazing work, right? And I was able to go through a script and create all these characters and all these voices, but it still took a tremendous amount of work. It was just a different skill set that going into the studio and finding the people and getting writers and all of that. And so these jobs don't disappear, and our output is still the same, but we're going to use different tools. And so I think, a lot of the fear, I would say, comes around reskilling. And so having again a narrative around that. John?
Sorry, I missed that, Abel. I was thinking about something else.
Oh,
What was the
sure.
question?
So let me read the question. How can companies adopt generative AI to enhance employee productivity and engagement without creating fear of job displacement?
Sorry, it just reminds me of at MIT we get these surveys saying, "Are you stressed?" And it's kind of, yeah, you should be stressed. um, it's I don't know quite how to answer that one, Abel. Um, I think staying up to date is critical. Lifelong learning for sure. Now we're fortunate. All we do is we kind of throw out the old things if we can in our brains and reload the new things. And I think that's the danger that if you've been through the ERP world, of SAP and Oracle, it was all about database and structuring the data and having the tables, and the most common things needed to be in the tables that were in cache, etc. And now it's not clear that's the problem. That I think what we're seeing, we're seeing companies like NVIDIA create these synthetic worlds now for training robots. I mean, I think that's the next thing to flag is robots are coming fast because now we know how to train them. A lot of this has been about if you can get reinforcement learning going where the machine is learning for itself, these machines learn at a fantastic speed. So I think it was AlphaGo that did chess, learned basically all of chess in about 4 hours. I mean, nobody said this is how you would need to do an opening. It's go find out for yourself. And we're getting to that stage now where these systems can teach themselves that reinforcement learning, you need to know what is good at any stage. So mathematics, for example, is one area that it's easy to get the data for reinforcement learning. And we're seeing machines now being trained, not the $100 million level, but at $1 million, you can stand up something that understands mathematics. So I think we're going to see different areas move at very different speeds. Abel.
So let me move on to another question here. This one is on healthcare, and there's a few variations of this, and I read this as how do we stay competitive in this emerging new world? And, as you might have read in the news, the Middle East is spinning up, both, Saudi Arabia and Dubai with massive investments into AI. The US is breaking records every year. China is certainly spinning up. And so the question says, with the recent launch of China's first AI hospital featuring 42 AI doctors, what are the potential ethical and practical challenges of AI-driven doctors in our healthcare systems? And then how can we ensure that AI doctors build trust, comply with regulations, and collaborate effectively with humans? And so let me go ahead and take that one first, since John just gave his response. And I think I'll take let me go ahead and set my timer here. I'll take the perspective here of creating a competitive capability within nations. I think throughout the last 10 plus years, there's been a growing awareness around the world that data is needed to be able to make decisions. And there have been a number of efforts to establish data portals, right? So for example, in the US, many cities have a data portal. Our students go to the database of Boston and download data. One of the most recent ones was fires. How do you predict fires and create better fire policy, right? And so this enables a lot. But what's coming next is, if you only have the data on its own doesn't do anything for you, right? You need to have something to interpret that data. And that's, AI or systems that you build on top of it. And countries haven't reached that level, US included. And so what's going to come at that next level is a big question. And I've been a big advocate of open source in this environment, in the same vein as Linux was the backbone for, the tech companies that enabled that generation of innovation. And Jason Wang and many others have said open source is really the only way. We need these components, and we have a good number of them already. We have Meta, we have Mistral, we have DeepSeek that are already online. And so I think that commons, this is what open source has always been about, developing that commons that everybody can leverage and then innovate is very important. And from a country strategy, being able to leverage that. Then there's the hardware and the power that John, I'm sure we'll talk about. And so I'm at time anyway. John?
Yeah, I mean, the big step forward is giving LLMs access to tools. That the LLM can do a search on the web. So the web is a tool for the LLM, and it can call out and ask whatever machine is sitting in front of the LLM handling things. It can call there and ask it to run code. So it'll search for the web. So that's kind of like stepping into the old world that, APIs, the LLM can hit an API. Where I think we're going to get slowed down. Well, so the danger is now that the LLM can certainly, control things, and it may do a good job or a bad job. I can imagine where you want speed of response, the LLMs are probably faster than humans. And in some cases, they're not as biased as the humans. With the doctors, they're finding out that the machines actually perform better than the doctors. And they actually perform better than the doctors with the machine. If you give the doctor the machine, it's not as if the doctor is going to add to the machine's capabilities. It actually may detract. So I think we're going to find that we're going to have to dig into these areas. Where I think there's kind of a lot of hope is the RAG systems, where we give the data. We build a system where we've got lots of data about our products, say. So if I've got a chatbot that needs to know about what products we have, I give it all the PDFs of the products. So it can have, gigabytes of information about our products. Now, when there's a query about a product, we dig into this repository, this RAG system it's called, and we pull out the PDFs that have the answers, or we think can help the machine answer the questions. And then the LLM will answer from those documents. And I haven't seen hallucination in that tight case. So I think we can put guardrails on these machines so that we don't get hallucination. Now, I have seen hallucination too. If you ask it to give you quotes, it'll make up people give you a quote from somebody that doesn't exist. Abel.
So let me just reset the timer here, and let me go ahead and read the question, and then I'll reset the timer. This is a question that's, all of the questions have been great, by the way. With US research funding cuts, especially from DOGE, top scientists are leaving for better support abroad, accelerating a brain drain. Business Insider, May 2025, it's the quote. Can AI meaningfully replace the loss of human scientific talent? Could generative AI or autonomous research tools fill the gap? Or are we overestimating what AI can do with the insight, creativity, and mentorship of human scientists? So again, not simple questions, great question. So I think that has already started. if you haven't heard me say this before, I'll repeat it again. University of Toronto created a system that you could call an AI scientist, and they would study, and people in our class, once again, did this, the residential program here at MIT, where they would study the indices of publications, and from those determine potential new ideas for new experiments, carry out those experiments, not one like a human would, but thousands of these. And from these thousands, be able to identify that which had most promise, be able to move on to a writing process, have a critique board to evaluate those write-ups, and then ultimately output a publication. And they have been able to beat, humans. It hasn't been anything spectacular, but the fact that you can even do it is pretty surprising if you think about the journey of what it takes to be a research at a top program. And so we're starting to see some of that. Obviously, at the moment, can you replace it? No, but I think that's coming soon. And there's an interesting aspect to this that I have been highlighting, and it's that the role of the scientist is changing, much like the role of the software engineer is changing. That the concerns for the software engineer used to be mostly about building code. Now they are about product fit. Are you creating the right thing? Right? Not just can you create this? And sometimes we get excited about technical things and we build things that really tickle us. But the same thing is true when it comes to the researcher in university, right? Can he or she now explore 1,000 new ideas, and their profile is not more like a university president, eventually. And so these are changing times. And so I think certainly there is potential, even if we're not there yet. John?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I think everyone should look at is this deep thinking or the slow think, that now we're building models not like the original chat GPT, 3.5 and 4.0, which immediately answered your question. They just, next word, etc. So what we're doing now is we're basically telling the machine, don't answer the question first. Think about what facts you might need to answer the question, and then go about, develop a structure for solving that problem. And so this is what's happening when you see it do now on ChatGPT. If you do a deep search, it'll go away for 15 minutes or so, and it'll dig out, 30 or 40 references and go through them. So it does an amazing job. So we're beginning to get these machines to basically, think like a human does. So we have synthesis. We can synthesize information. We can do analytics where we dive down. Given a fact, we can analyze what might come next. Inference. And we can get the machines to do that. And so it looks like the future is going to be these slow think machines. So already if you go to 01 and 03, this is GPT, 01 and 03, they are slow think. Now, the other thing is we're using multiple, basically, we're dividing the machine into mixture of experts, it's called. And DeepSeek basically had 256 experts. So you give the problem to each of these experts, or you may choose the top 10 experts. If it's a healthcare problem, okay, I've got experts in that. And you can have it vote on, okay, what's the best solution? So my sense is this whole area of figuring out how to control the machine, we're getting there. We're having the machine being able to, vote on these experts. We're doing chain of thought. That's this slow think. And I think that's where we're going to see, the biggest improvements. I think my time is up. Sorry, Abel.
Oh, it's okay. We have a few minutes left, I think 7 minutes. So if you have any questions, go ahead and post. Was there anything that caught your eye, John, from the comments in the thread? I know it's hard to keep up with them.
No, I mean, I thought the questions were really on the mark, that I think it's the things that we're worried about. There are certain things that we have to get right. I'd be interested in why Meta have delayed their Behemoth machine. They just announced that it was supposed to be, their next machine was supposed to be out in April. And it looks like it's being delayed. Well, it is delayed, but it'd be interesting to know why. It seems like it may not be better than their previous machine. Any insight to that? Abel, have you read anything about Behemoth?
No, sorry, I was
Okay.
reading through the questions, and one of the things that struck me is that many people want guarantees, and I've seen even things such as, well, what do we do, and how do we make sure the data is not exfiltrated? And one of the things that I've mentioned several times in the past is to think of these tools, new tools, as you do of your AI, sorry, not your AI, your cloud tools. So for example, if you use a database in the cloud, you're putting your data under somebody else's control, right? If you use, let's say a system like SharePoint that holds the community and the knowledge of the community and so on in an enterprise context, all of that data is at the cloud provider. And so when it comes to, the end user license agreement, the license that you're paying for, this comes attached with a set of rights, right? And the other thing that I've mentioned as well is think about Gmail, right? Gmail is public and Google is reading our mail. And if you didn't know, you should know, right? However, if you pay for Workspace, Google's Workspace, then this is private. And this is what universities and corporations use. And so when it comes to looking at the licenses, something similar takes place. Now, not everybody's using OpenAI. Some of them are using Anthropic. What are Anthropic's licenses like? A lot of people are running their own. So one of the big patterns over the past 2 years is that corporations are not buying yet from the big vendors. They're rolling pretty much everything up internally. And this is for products they're creating, right? Not consuming, that's different. But there's a lot of opportunity there to create models internally as well. And so if you are a small group within a corporation and you have some pain point and this can solve it for you, this is a great approach, right? And as this grows and it becomes, something that's high ROI, then central IT can get involved. But there's a lot of concern around this. But a good parallel here is to look at cloud, because we have been consuming a great deal of services, but we're just not calling them AI. And in fact, until way before generative AI, people were using sentiment analysis and they were using k-means and clustering and all sorts of algorithms off the shelf, is that instead of running locally, you were running on Amazon or somewhere else. John?
Yeah, I was just looking the other day at a paper from MIT, actually, and it was on the lottery ticket hypothesis. What they found was once you've trained up, one of these monster models, you can go in and you'll find that a lot of the weights are near zero. So you could basically get rid of those weights. So you can kind of erode this model. And what they found was basically hidden inside this monster model, say with 1.75 trillion unknowns, there's a much smaller model that can perform at the same level as the big model. So it's called the lottery ticket hypothesis. Let me just get the paper here, and it's worth reading. Now, unfortunately, we don't know how to train the small model off the straight away, that we have to go through building the large model before we can do that. But here's a link to it. It's kind of comment. StreamYard doesn't seem to like it when I put in. Let me just try again.
No, I think that the problem is that they don't show up in LinkedIn. You have to put them in directly in LinkedIn, otherwise they don't get relayed.
Yeah,
we
just
can
look
show
up.
it.
Yeah, I'll
If
just
we
say
do this,
lottery ticket.
If you put it into the chat, I can highlight it.
Yeah, it's called the lottery ticket hypothesis. So there's a lot of great research coming out. Certainly DeepSeek, came out with a load of very neat methods, but it wasn't that we didn't know about them. So, Abel, maybe you got a minute left, I think.
Yeah, so before time runs out, I wanted to remind everyone, not everyone here is in the community, that if you want to get access to the activities of the community, to hit the Global Gen AI page, and there's a process there for onboarding, or watch the beginning of this stream. Oscar spoke about how to do this, and there's going to be more of these coming weekly. I'm going to be traveling next week, so I won't be doing it, but we'll also bring some other people in, because you'll get bored of just hearing us. So it'll be fun to talk to some other people that have some different perspectives than we do. So this is a lot of fun. Like I said, I spent yesterday's evening trying to use this new movie engine, a new company that Sequoia Capital is investing in. And I was surprised once again. This happens every couple of months or so. John, any parting words?
No, I the same with voice. I mean, I think the voice agents are getting amazingly good. They've mastered the speed of response now, that there's hardly any delay. How they're doing it. Sesame is a really good one. Look up my girlfriend Maya. She's the demo.
She is sweet and charming and lovely.
Sweet and charming, right?
Yeah. Let me put Oscar on just to make sure I said the right thing. Oscar, he's not, he's off the stage. Let me see, add to the stage. There he is. Let's see.
Yeah, thank you.
I think, yeah, there you are. Do you want to say something about, how people join?
Yeah, 100%. So just to reiterate basically what I was saying earlier, currently we're only onboarding volunteers to facilitate an opening to all past cohorts in this current one, this May 26th. So if you want to join in early, message our LinkedIn page, say you want to volunteer, and we'll get you fast track through that onboarding process. And for those of you on WhatsApp, excited to have you guys join this community if you want to join our close cohort conglomerate, and excited for the future.
Okay, so it was great seeing you all. I'm going to go ahead and shut down the stream, and happy Gen AI learning.
Thanks,
John.
everyone. Thank you,
Take care,
Abel.
everyone.
Thanks, Oscar.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you, Oscar.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.